He beats me to entertain his friends, and my revenge shocked them. I was 6 months pregnant when James kicked me in the stomach, in front of his friends. He laughed as I fell to the floor, holding my belly, gasping for air. His friends burst into wild laughter like they were watching a comedy movie. They clapped, slapped each other's backs, and praised him like a hero. One of them even said, "James, you be real man. No allow woman climb your head." That night, I almost lost my baby. But no one cared. Not one person in that room asked if I was okay. James didn't even look at me. He just poured himself a drink, sat back on the couch, and continued joking with his so-called friends like nothing had happened. My name is Anita. I am a mother, a woman, and I used to be the wife of a millionaire. A man who believed that the more you break a woman, the more power you have. But this is not just my story. This is the story of how I became his greatest downfall. And trust me, you haven't heard anything yet. James was rich, yes. But not always. I met him when he was still working in a dusty office with no air conditioner. He had only 2 shirts, and both had torn collars. But he was kind. Humble. He called me Queen. He would send me long messages at midnight just to say, "I love you." We had dreams, big ones. We would sit on the balcony, sipping Gary and groundnut, talking about how one day we would own a house in the city. When he finally made money, everything changed. At first, it was the small things. He started correcting my grammar in public. Then he complained about the way I dressed. Next, he told me to quit my job because a real wife doesn't hustle like a man. I agreed because I trusted him. I believed him. But I was wrong. Very wrong. His money made him arrogant. Proud. Untouchable. He started hosting parties at our house, bringing home loud, empty men who had nothing but insults for women. Every time they visited, James turned into someone I didn't know. He would shout at me in front of them. Call me useless. Say things like, "This woman can't even speak proper English," or "She's lucky I picked her from the street." Sometimes he would grab my hair and drag me to the kitchen just to make them laugh. They laughed. Oh, how they laughed. And I died slowly inside. One night, during a party, I mistakenly dropped a wine glass. The room went silent. James stood up. Walked towards me slowly. I held my breath. Then, slap. He hit me so hard I fell to the ground. My cheek burned. My pride shattered. He turned to his friends and said, "That's how to handle nonsense." And they all cheered. I wanted to scream. I wanted to fight. But I looked at my daughter Nora, standing at the stairs. Her small eyes filled with tears. And I knew I couldn't leave. Not yet. Because I had no money. No job. No house. No family support. James made sure I had nothing except him. So I stayed. But something inside me began to grow, quietly. It wasn't fear anymore. It was fire. One day, while James was away on a business trip, I found an old diary of mine. It was filled with dreams. Plans. Goals. My handwriting looked so young and full of life. I cried that night, not because I missed who I used to be, but because I knew she was still inside me. Hiding. Waiting for a chance to rise again. That was the night I decided to stop surviving. I would start planning. Every insult James threw at me became a brick. I used each one to build my revenge. And my revenge would not be loud. No. It would be patient. Gentle. Like water dripping on stone until it breaks. James thought I was weak. But weakness is not the absence of strength. Sometimes, it is the training ground for power. I stopped fighting him with words. I became quiet. I served his friends with a smile. I cleaned his mess without complaints. I stopped arguing. He thought he had one. He didn't know I was watching. Listening. Studying. Every account he opened. Every deal he made. Every weakness he showed. I wrote it all down, in a secret notebook I kept behind the water tank outside. I knew I was in a battle. And in battle, the one who waits wins. The last slap I ever received came on a Sunday. His friends were around. He accused me of forgetting to iron his white shirt. I tried to explain. I even knelt down. But he didn't care. He kicked me in front of everyone. Again. I fell hard. But this time, I didn't cry. I stood up, wiped the blood from my lip, and looked him in the eyes. I smiled. That was the day he should have known something had changed. But like most arrogant men, he was blind to his own end. And that's why I'm telling you this story. Because very soon, James will go from sleeping on silk sheets to begging for a mattress in a dirty corner of the city. He beat me to entertain his friends. But I will bury his pride in silence. With class. With calm. And when I'm done, even his shadow will not respect him again. The day James came home and found the house sparkling clean, food hot on the table, and me smiling in silence, he thought he had finally broken me. He smirked, kissed his teeth, and said, "This is how a good wife behaves." I nodded and served him his food. I didn't even flinch when he threw the spoon and shouted, "You didn't put enough salt." I just picked up the plate, went back into the kitchen, adjusted the salt, and returned with a calm face. He didn't know he was dining with a woman who had declared battle. A different kind of battle. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that wins without raising a voice. James controlled everything. The house was in his name. The cars. The businesses. The bank accounts. Even my phone was registered under his own details. If I tried to speak with anyone outside, he would say I was becoming too friendly. So I stopped speaking. But I started watching. Every time he spoke carelessly on the phone about deals or bragged about money to his friends, I listened from the other room. Every receipt. Every call. Every visit. I noticed it all. He didn't know I had written down the pins to his accounts. He used them so often and loudly, it became easy to memorize. He didn't know I had made friends with the cleaner at his office. The girl was young and naive, but talkative. She told me how James often slept with clients and used office funds to sponsor women. He didn't know I had a cousin who worked in one of the banks he secretly saved his dollars in. Everything he used to show off, his power, his secrets, his shame, I began to collect like seeds. And I watered them with patience. One morning, while Nora was at school and James had traveled to Port Harcourt for a 3-day business meeting, I took my first big step. I called my old friend Grace. We hadn't spoken in years. James forced me to cut her off when he saw how independent she was. He said she would teach me bad habits. But I kept her number in my head like a buried treasure. Grace cried when she heard my voice. "Anita, is this really you? You're alive." I told her everything. Every slap. Every insult. Every humiliation. She was silent for a long time, then said, "You've suffered. But now it's time to rise." Grace was a lawyer. A smart one. And more importantly, a trusted one. She told me exactly what to do. "Start gathering evidence," she said. "Don't worry, I'll help you with the rest." That was the beginning of my return. James came back from Port Harcourt with a new phone and a new girl saved as Accountant B. I saw the messages. I saw the pictures. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I even helped him plug the phone when the battery was low. He thought I didn't know. That made it easier. Because the moment a proud man underestimates you, that's when he opens the door to his downfall. I opened a new bank account in my cousin's name and started moving money. Small amounts. Slowly. Bit by bit. Using the app he once showed me how to use when he was feeling like a good husband. He said, "One day you'll thank me for teaching you how to move money like a boss." He was right. I thanked him, silently. Then I made copies of documents he kept hidden in a locked drawer. I had found the key months earlier inside his old shoe, hidden under the bed. He never suspected anything because he believed I was too stupid to look. I copied property papers, business shares, loan agreements, everything. I saved them in a hidden flash drive. And I kept that drive inside Nora's teddy bear. That bear became the guardian of my revenge. It wasn't just about escaping anymore. No. I wanted him to feel everything I felt. The shame. The loss. The pain of watching everything you built collapse while you stand there, helpless. Then came the day he humiliated me in front of his mother. It was Nora's birthday. I baked a small cake. Decorated the sitting room with balloons. I even wore makeup and tied my headscarf like the old Anita, strong and elegant. James walked in with his mother and his friends, looked at the cake, and scoffed. "This rubbish is what you call birthday party? For my daughter? You don't even have shame." He picked the cake and smashed it on the floor. Nora cried. I bent down slowly, cleaned the floor with a rag, and said, "I'll get another cake." His mother looked at him, shocked. "James, this is not right," she said softly. But he shouted her into silence. "Don't tell me how to run my house, Mama." That was the final spark. Even his mother had now seen what I had lived with for years. But that day, while he drank and danced with his friends, I stood by the corner, quiet and still. I didn't cry, because I had already arranged the final move. 2 days later, I got a call from Grace. "Everything is ready. We just need your word." I looked at James, snoring on the couch, shirt open, belly out, phone in his hand, whiskey bottle half empty. He looked like a king. But he was about to wake up in rags. I whispered back, "It's time." And just like that, the first hammer of justice dropped. One email at a time. One signature at a time. One transfer at a time. He had no idea that his empire was cracking under his nose. And I, his quiet little wife, was the one holding the hammer. James didn't notice the first crack. He still wore his designer suits, drove his Range Rover through the estate like a king, and walked with the pride of a man who believed he was untouchable. But deep in the heart of his empire, termites had begun to chew. And I was the queen of the colony. 2 weeks after I gave Grace the go-ahead, strange things started happening in James's perfect little world. First, one of his major clients pulled out of a real estate deal, Nigerian Naira 27 million gone, just like that. He came home furious, throwing documents around the house and shouting into his phone. "These useless clients want to insult me." I asked him what happened. He shoved me aside. "Get out of my face, Anita. You think everything is about gossip." I nodded, backed away, and watched. Watched as the first candle in his palace dimmed. He didn't know I was the one who had sent the anonymous email to that client, an email with evidence of how James had forged a signature on a previous deal. The documents he didn't even know I had copied. Next came the silent freeze. His company account was flagged for suspicious activities. He paced the living room in his boxers, sweating, pressing his phone non-stop, trying to reach his account officer. When he finally got through, he shouted, "What do you mean blocked? I own this bank." They told him it was a compliance issue. He blamed his staff. He blamed hackers. He even blamed witches. He didn't know the documents I sent were already in the hands of the EFCC. Thanks to Grace and a quiet connection in the financial crime unit, James was now under investigation. And I hadn't even touched him directly. Still, he didn't suspect me. Because I had returned fully to my silent role, serving his meals, bathing Nora, staying in the background like a faded painting. He still called me names. Still boasted about his sharp brain to his foolish friends. He even gave one of them my old car to show her she's nothing without me. And I smiled and waved as they drove off. Because soon, not even his shoes would belong to him. Then came the shocker. One rainy evening, he returned from the office with a folded letter in his hand. His white shirt was soaked, his eyes red. "What happened?" I asked gently. He looked at me for the first time in weeks. "They removed me," he said. "Removed you. Board of directors. They said my image is damaging the company. That pending investigation, I should step aside." I pressed my palm to my chest. "Wow," I whispered. "That's serious." James collapsed into the couch and grabbed his head. "They even froze my salary. My own salary, Anita. Can you imagine? Me. James Zowalabi." I sat beside him, touched his shoulder gently, and said, "Everything will be okay." But deep inside, I wanted to laugh. Because for years, I begged him to see me. To listen. To be a better man. He ignored me. Now the world was forcing him to listen to silence. That night, while he snored in the room with one hand on his chest like a fallen king, I opened my notebook. I ticked off 3 items. Real estate deal ruined. Company account flagged. Suspended from office. Next step, destroy the image he worshipped. The image of the perfect man. The husband of the year. The alpha male. I had already started leaking screenshots of his chats to a blog that specialized in celebrity scandals. The same chats where he insulted his mother, mocked his staff, and bragged about cheating on me. I sent them anonymously through Grace's burner phone. And within 48 hours, his name was trending. Hashtag James the Monster. Twitter. Facebook. Instagram. Screenshots everywhere. I can't believe he said this about his wife. So this is the man we called a role model. Any woman that stays with this kind of man needs help. He blamed his staff. Accused his friends. He even accused his ex-girlfriend. But he never looked at the woman sitting across the dining table, quietly serving his jollof rice with grilled chicken. I had become invisible to him again. And that was my biggest strength. One night, he came home late, drunk and bitter. He threw his belt on the ground, kicked the table and shouted, "Why is the world against me?" I didn't answer. He turned to me with bloodshot eyes. "Anita, are you happy now? You want to see me suffer, ABI?" I looked up slowly, tears resting in the corners of my eyes. "No, James. I've always wanted to see you happy. But maybe you don't know what happiness really looks like." He stared at me, confused. I walked away before he could react. But behind that calm voice was a woman sharpening the final dagger. He didn't know I had filed for a secret divorce months earlier, with Grace guiding me every step of the way. He didn't know I was the owner of the new cleaning company servicing his office building, the one quietly collecting inside gossip and forwarding it to his enemies. He didn't know the woman he once called Bush Girl was now the puppet master pulling the strings in his downfall. But he would know. Soon. Because the final blow was coming. And this time, there would be no friends to clap. No one to cheer. No soft couch to collapse on. Only the cold, hard truth. That he beat the wrong woman. And now? Now she was writing his final chapter. One signature at a time. The day I left James, he didn't even notice. He was too busy drowning in his own pride. Too busy fighting invisible enemies. Too busy blaming the world for his fall. I left a single note on the pillow beside him. 6 words only. I begged. You mocked. I'm done. Then I picked Nora's school bag, packed 2 dresses, 1 Bible, and walked out the gate, quietly, peacefully, without looking back. Not like the movies. No shouting. No suitcase. No rain falling. Just a woman who had finally taken back her breath. Grace had arranged a safe place for me and Nora. A small 2-bedroom apartment in Acadia, far from the estate that used to be my cage. It wasn't fancy, but it was free, peaceful, and more than anything, it was mine. The first night, Nora slept on my chest like a baby. No more waking up in fear. No more hiding in closets when Daddy shouted. Just soft pillows, warm air, and a mother's heartbeat. She smiled in her sleep. And that was when I knew I did the right thing. But leaving James was not the end. No. It was the beginning of the real fire. Because what's the point of breaking free if the person who caged you still walks like a king? James woke up the next morning to silence. No breakfast. No slippers at the foot of the bed. No wife kneeling beside the door, begging for transport money. He called out, "Anita." No answer. He checked the bathroom. Empty. Kitchen. Empty. Nora's room. Empty. He stepped outside half-naked shouting, "Anatea." The gateman said, "Oga, madam and your Pekin waka go since early morning. I think say you sabi." He stormed back inside and picked his phone. 10 missed calls from clients. 3 from his lawyer. 1 message from his office secretary. "Sir, police came this morning with a letter from EFCC. They took documents." James dropped the phone. It hit the marble floor and cracked. And in that moment, the same floor that once held his gold-plated trophies now held his shaking legs. 3 days passed. He didn't know where I was. I made sure of it. He called my relatives. They ignored him. He called Grace. He didn't know she was my lawyer. She didn't answer. He went to the police station to report that his wife and child were missing. They told him, "Oga, we received court notice this morning. Your wife say make we no allow you near her or the child. Domestic violence case." Signed and stamped. His mouth hung open. He laughed. Anita? Report me? That woman can't even talk back, let alone report me. But the law doesn't care about ego. Especially when backed with pictures, videos, medical reports, voice recordings. For years, I had gathered them quietly. Now they were speaking. And James was losing his voice. He tried to fight. Hired lawyers. Paid for press releases to clean his name. But it was too late. Clients started pulling out. His friends? Gone. One by one, they stopped picking his calls. The same friends who once praised him for disciplining his wife were now sharing his leaked audio clips in their WhatsApp groups. He went online and saw comments like, "This is what you get when you think your wife is a punching bag. Imagine turning your own home into a circus just to feel powerful." He turned off his phone. But the world doesn't stop spinning just because you close your eyes. I finally filed the final divorce papers. Grace stood beside me at the court entrance, holding my hand. "You're doing well, Anita," she whispered. Tears fell. Not tears of sadness. Tears of relief. Of freedom. The judge asked James, "Do you have anything to say before I rule?" He stood there, wearing an old blazer, shoes dusty, face pale. He looked at me for the first time, not with anger, not with pride, but with something he had never shown before. Regret. But regret comes late when your hands are already dirty. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. Then said, "Anita, I'm sorry." I nodded. And said, "I forgave you the day I walked away. But forgiveness is not the same as return." The judge struck the gavel. And just like that, I was no longer Mrs. Owolabi. I was Anita again. Whole. Standing. Alive. James returned home that day to empty chairs. His friends gone. His wife gone. His child gone. His business gone. Even the house was no longer his. The bank repossessed it. They had come that morning with a heavy-duty truck and sealed the gates. He sat on the dusty staircase, eyes red, hands trembling. The same stairs I once sat on, pregnant and bleeding. But no one clapped for him now. No one cheered. Because when pride collapses, even silence feels like thunder. I didn't post anything on social media. Didn't boast. Didn't gloat. Revenge doesn't always need noise. Sometimes, the quiet fall of a giant is enough to shake the world. And trust me, James fell hard. From a mansion to a room. From a Range Rover to begging rides. From a roaring lion to a man asking the gatekeeper for transport fare. And me? I was just getting started. The first time I opened my new office door, I stood still for a moment and smiled. The AC hummed gently, the scent of fresh paint still hung in the air, and the name on the glass wall read boldly, Anita Solutions Ltd. Just 6 months ago, I was crawling through shame, cleaning floors, and covering bruises with makeup. Now I was wearing a black fitted suit, a pair of heels, and confidence like a crown. I didn't just survive James, I rose above him. Grace helped me register the company, but everything else? I built it from scratch. The cleaning contract I secretly secured while I was still in James's house had grown. More companies saw my work. They saw my discipline. They saw my name. And they trusted me, not as someone's wife, but as a woman of her own. One day, I received a letter from a corporate estate company asking if I'd like to pitch for a bigger cleaning contract. They didn't know I used to be the same woman who once scrubbed toilets with tears in her eyes. They only knew the woman I had become. I dropped my pen. Took a breath. Then I picked up the phone and called Grace. "It's time to register me as a government contractor," I said. "We're not hiding anymore." She laughed so hard, I could hear her clapping. "I told you," she said, "you're the fire they thought they put out." But while I was building quietly, James was breaking loudly. The videos of him yelling at his staff had gone viral. A former employee came out with a full thread on social media, calling him a bully and a thief. The police invited him twice. He didn't go. They came for him the third time. Neighbors saw him being bundled into a black van. The same neighbors who once nodded proudly whenever his car passed by now shook their heads in pity. I didn't celebrate. I didn't clap. I didn't post. I just sat on my office chair, sipped my tea, and thanked God that I didn't take revenge with my hands. I let the truth fight for me. And truth, when armed with patience, always wins. 2 weeks later, I received an envelope from James's lawyer. Inside was a letter, a desperate request for visitation rights to see Nora. I stared at the paper for minutes. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I just smiled. I folded it neatly and placed it on my desk. Nora was watching cartoons in the next room. I went in, sat beside her, and said, "Your father wants to see you." She looked at me, confused. "Which father?" I swallowed. "Your daddy, James." She paused. Then said, "I don't remember him much." Those words pierced me deeper than any slap he had ever given me. Not because she forgot him, but because even at 5, she had learned to protect herself from pain. I kissed her forehead and said, "Don't worry, baby. You'll never forget who loves you." That night, I wrote James back. My letter was short. "You're free to apply through the family court. My daughter's piece is not up for discussion." He replied the next day, begging, crying, saying he missed us, that he had changed, that life without me was meaningless, that he wanted a second chance. I didn't answer. I forwarded the message to Grace. She replied on my behalf. "She's no longer yours to hurt." Word spread fast. That James, the man who once walked with shoulders high like a god, was now sleeping on his cousin's couch. That his company had been seized. That his cars were sold to settle debts. That one of his girlfriends had exposed his secrets online. And that the woman he used to slap for fun now owned a growing business, drove a Mercedes, and was living in a serviced apartment in Lekki. People asked me, "Anita, what's your secret?" I always said the same thing: pain is a teacher. If you survive it, you will never be the same. But the biggest surprise came when I was invited to speak at a women's empowerment conference. Me, the woman who once couldn't speak without fear. I stood on that stage, looking at hundreds of faces, some crying, some clapping, and I told my story, not with bitterness, but with boldness. I said, I was once a wife to a man who thought silence meant weakness. But now he knows silence can be a weapon. He beat me to entertain his friends. Now those friends are hiding from shame, and I, his victim, am now the voice. The hall erupted with applause. I looked up. My eyes watered. But I didn't cry. Not for pain, but for strength. After the conference, a lady walked up to me. She was shaking. She held my hand and whispered, "I was just like you, until now." I hugged her tightly. "You're not just like me," I said. "You're better. Because you're rising earlier than I did." And that was when I knew my revenge wasn't just about James. It was about every woman watching. Every woman hiding. Every woman hurting. Because when one woman escapes the fire and lives to tell her story, she becomes the torch for others. James created a monster with his pride. But I became the miracle he never saw coming. I was sitting inside a small cafe in Victoria Island, waiting for a client who wanted to hire my company to clean and maintain their entire property chain. It was a big deal, a multi-million naira contract. I wore a soft pink gown with a black belt, small earrings, and clear lip gloss. Simple, elegant, powerful. That morning I had looked into the mirror and whispered to myself, "You're no longer a victim. You're the table." The waiter brought me a glass of freshly pressed juice and a warm smile. I nodded and said thank you. Just as I lifted the glass to take a sip, someone rushed into the cafe, panting, sweaty, confused. Heads turned. My eyes locked with his. It was James. He looked nothing like the man I used to know. His once polished skin was rough. His beard, overgrown. Shirt wrinkled. Trousers torn slightly at the edge. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes searched the room like a lost child. When he saw me, he froze. Then slowly, he started walking towards me. I looked away. He stopped right beside my chair and whispered, "Anita, please talk to me." The entire cafe had gone quiet. People stared. A few pulled out their phones. I kept my face straight and said nothing. He dropped to his knees. Yes. On the floor. Right there. He was kneeling. "My life is finished," he said, tears already dripping from his eyes. Everything is gone. My house, my cars, my business, my name. Even my friends. They all left me, Anita. Please. I can't breathe. I need you. I felt something rise in my throat. Not pity. Not revenge. Power. Not the kind that destroys. But the kind that says, I survived you. I leaned forward and whispered without emotion, James, get up. You're embarrassing yourself. He didn't move. The cafe manager came over. Madam, is everything all right? I nodded. Yes. Just an old memory refusing to die. People murmured. One woman near the window said, Wait, is that not that man from social media? Another whispered, He's the one that used to beat his wife and boast about it. James looked around, and suddenly he saw what I saw for years, shame. He stood slowly and wiped his face with the back of his hand. I just want to see Nora. Please, Anita. She's my daughter. I took out my phone and showed him a picture of Nora in her ballet dress, holding a certificate of excellence. She's fine, I said. And she doesn't ask about you. That sentence shattered him. He stumbled back, hands on his head, then ran out of the cafe. I sighed. Not because I felt sorry for him, but because that moment proved something deeper. You can be a millionaire, wear gold watches, drive jeeps, and have boys shouting your name. But the moment you misuse the one person who truly loved you, you've lost everything. Later that night, I got a call from Grace. She was laughing so hard, she could barely breathe. You won't believe what I just saw, she said. What? James posted an apology video online. On his knees. Crying. Saying, I failed as a husband, as a man, and as a human being. I destroyed the one woman who ever truly loved me. I didn't laugh. I just said, it's too late. And it was. Because he didn't break me. He built me. He forced me into the fire. And instead of burning, I became gold. But here's the twist life never told him. 2 weeks after the cafe incident, he showed up at Nora's school. He waited by the gate like a stray dog. The security man called me immediately. Madam, one man day here. Him say na him be Nora papa. I told him, call the police. He didn't run this time. He stood still as they handcuffed him. His voice shook as he said, I just wanted to see my child. The police looked at him, then looked at me when I arrived. Madam, should we press trespassing charges? I paused. Then said, no. Let him go. James looked at me like I had just saved him. But I wasn't saving him. I was freeing myself completely. The final letter came 3 weeks later. From James's lawyer. He had signed over the remaining shares of his collapsed company to me. The letter read, let her have it. Maybe she'll build something beautiful with it, since I never did. I folded the letter, put it in my drawer, and told Grace, I'm not touching it. Let it rot. Because I didn't want his leftovers. I wanted my own story. And I was already writing it with fireproof ink. By the time my company made its first 100 million naira deal, James had moved to a small one-bedroom apartment in Ajigunle. He worked as a freelance driver. Sometimes, I heard stories. That he had tried to marry another woman, but her family rejected him. That he sat alone in bars, staring into space. That he sometimes whispered my name in his sleep. But none of it moved me. Because you can't build love on broken bones. You can't plant peace in a house soaked with violence. And you definitely can't abuse a woman for fun and expect her to remain your shadow. I had become my own light. The first time James entered my office as a worker, he couldn't lift his head. He stood by the glass door, holding a mop, wearing the blue overalls of my cleaning company. I was in a meeting when my assistant knocked softly, leaned in, and whispered, Ma, there's a new hire from the agency. He just arrived. But, it's your ex-husband. My pen stopped mid-sentence. My heart didn't race. I calmly said, let him wait in the hallway. I'll come out when I'm ready. The clients in front of me had no idea what was going on. But deep inside me, something shifted. Not revenge. Not anger. Just quiet power. After the meeting, I stepped out of my glass office, heels clicking on the marble floor, suit sharp, head high. There he was. The man who once called me a nobody. The man who kicked me in front of his friends. The man who threw cake on the floor on our daughter's birthday and laughed. Now standing with a mop and bucket. Eyes on the ground. Shoulders folded. He looked up slowly. When our eyes met, he opened his mouth as if to speak. I raised my hand. Don't say a word. He closed his mouth and nodded. I turned to the supervisor and said, assign him to the lower floor washroom. Let him start from there. Yes, Ma. He followed the supervisor quietly, carrying his bucket and mop like a bag of shame. I watched him walk away. No pride. No crown. Just a man reaping what he planted. And me? I went back into my office, opened my laptop, and continued building. Because I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. And he was now just another cleaner in a company owned by the woman he once crushed. That day, the staff didn't know. Only my assistant did. She came to me during lunch break and whispered, Madam, are you sure you want him working here? I smiled. Why not? This company gives people second chances. She blinked, confused. But I cut her off gently. He will learn what dignity means by watching how I treat those who have none left. Later that evening, as I stepped out to enter my car, I saw James in the parking lot, cleaning the glass windows of the building. He didn't notice I was watching. He moved slowly, wiping the glass with shaking hands, sweat dripping down his forehead. He stopped for a second, leaned against the wall, and exhaled deeply like a man who hadn't rested in years. I could have walked away. But I didn't. I walked toward him, slowly. He turned and saw me. Stood up straight. Wiped his face with the back of his arm. Good evening, Ma, he said. Not Anita. Not babe. Not woman. But Ma. I nodded. How's the cleaning going? He swallowed. Fine, Ma. I'll finish before the shift ends. I reached into my bag, brought out a small bottle of water, and handed it to him. He hesitated, then took it. Thank you, he said, almost in a whisper. You're welcome, I replied. Then walked away. And that was when it hit me. He finally understood. He finally saw the woman he once tried to destroy, not as a victim, but as a boss. A real boss. The next few weeks, he worked quietly. Always early. Always silent. Always distant. He never spoke to me directly unless required. But I could see the shame in his steps. The regret in his eyes. He had gone from a man who was feared to a man who was ignored. From a lion to a shadow. One day, while conducting a surprise inspection, I entered the staff rest area. I saw James sitting alone, holding a small picture in his hand. It was Nora. The picture I once placed beside her bed. He didn't see me. He was staring at it like it was the last light in his world. He whispered softly, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't interrupt. I left quietly. Because I wasn't there to make him suffer. Life was already doing that better than I ever could. The month ended, and I called for the monthly review meeting with all floor workers. They gathered in the conference hall. I walked in and greeted everyone. Then I turned to James. Mr. Owolabi, please give us a quick report of your assigned areas. He stood slowly. Cleared his throat. His voice cracked. Yes, Ma. I cleaned the lower floor washroom, main corridor windows, and lobby staircase. No complaints reported. Good, I said. He nodded and sat down. That was it. No drama. No emotions. Just accountability. He had finally learned how to answer to the woman he once mocked. Not with arrogance, but with humility. A week later, I heard he resigned. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't cause a scene. Just left his uniform on the table and disappeared. But I knew why. He had finally reached the end of himself. And sometimes, that's where real change begins. 3 days after he left, I got a message on my phone. It was a screenshot. James was now volunteering at a foundation for abused women. The caption read, From the man who broke to the man who now builds. I didn't comment. I didn't react. I just closed my phone and went to hug my daughter. Because no matter what the world said, I knew one thing for sure. I had won. It started with one message. A journalist from a major TV station reached out to my office email. The subject line read, "Your story is changing lives. Can we share it?" I sat in silence after reading it. For years, I was voiceless, trapped in the shadows of a man who laughed at my tears, who used pain as entertainment. Now someone wanted the world to hear me, not as James's wife, not as a victim, but as a woman who rose from ashes and became fire. Grace told me to think carefully. "Anita, this story is powerful, but once you speak, there's no going back." I smiled gently. "Grace, I lost everything when I kept quiet. Speaking up is not the risk, silence is." 2 weeks later, I walked into a bright TV studio. Lights everywhere. Camera crew adjusting lenses. Producers buzzing around. I wore a blue gown, neat braids packed behind, no flashy makeup, just the face of a woman who had walked through hell barefoot and still came out whole. The host was a calm, respectful woman. She hugged me before we started. "You're a warrior," she whispered. "Let's tell the world why." The red light blinked. The camera rolled. She asked me, "Anita, how did this all begin?" And for the first time, I told it all. From the slap in the living room to the kick when I was pregnant. From the cake that landed on the floor to the day I watched him cry in front of strangers. I spoke with clarity, not anger. With strength, not pride. Because my story wasn't just about what happened to me, it was about what I did after it happened. Viewers began to flood the station's page with comments. Women cried. Men apologized. Even teenagers said, "Auntie, you're a real queen." The interview went viral. 10 million views in 3 days. I didn't expect it. I didn't chase it. But it came like a storm, carrying my voice on the wings of truth. Soon, invitations poured in. NGOs, women's rights groups, even international organizations wanted me to speak. One woman called me from Ghana. She said, "I watched your story, packed my bag, and left a man who nearly killed me. You saved my life." I broke into tears. Because all I ever wanted was for my pain to mean something. And now it did. But with the attention came something unexpected. James. He reached out through a long email. It was raw, broken, and filled with things I never thought he had the courage to say. He wrote, "Anita, I watched your interview. I couldn't breathe. That version of me, I hate him. I want to thank you, not for what you did to me, but for what you did for yourself. You taught me more by leaving than you ever could have by staying. I'm not asking for pity. I just needed to say sorry. Truly. Deeply. Forever." I read the message over and over again. I didn't reply. Because some wounds don't need closure. They just need peace. A month later, I stood on another stage, this time in New York City, speaking at a women's global leadership summit. I looked into the crowd and remembered the nights I slept on a cold tile floor, holding my daughter tight while hiding from the man I once called my world. Now the world was listening. And I spoke not just for myself, but for every woman silenced by fear, crushed by shame, or trapped in a house that smells of expensive perfume but echoes with violence. I said, "They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds. I'm not a hero. I'm not perfect. I'm just a woman who got tired of dying silently." The hall stood on its feet, clapping, crying, celebrating. And in that moment, I wasn't just Anita. I was the voice of every broken girl who dared to rebuild herself. Back in Nigeria, my story became a school case study. Social workers used it as training material. Churches began holding workshops for men and women, teaching them what love is not. Even the governor's wife invited me for a roundtable talk. She said, "Women like you, Anita, are building the nation quietly." But through it all, I remained grounded. I still dropped Nora off at school. Still attended PTA meetings. Still visited Grace every Sunday for tea and quiet laughter. Fame didn't change me. Pain had already done that. Then one day, I got a call from the headmistress at Nora's school. "Your daughter just won the state essay competition. She wrote about you." My heart stopped. I rushed to the school, entered the assembly hall, and saw Nora standing on stage with a microphone. She read her winning essay aloud. "My mummy is a strong woman. She smiled through pain. She helped people even when no one helped her. I want to be like her, not because she's famous, but because she never gave up. I covered my mouth. Tears rolled down my face. That was my real reward. Not the stage. Not the applause. But the little girl who once hid from her father's rage. Now standing tall, using her voice. After the event, I hugged her tight. She whispered, "Mummy, did I make you proud?" I smiled through tears. "You didn't just make me proud, baby. You made me whole." And right there I knew. This story wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about rebirth. The rain fell heavily the night my foundation was launched. Not the kind of rain that ruins plans. No. It was the kind that felt like a cleansing. Like heaven was washing away every slap, every insult, every bruise I ever carried in silence. The hall was full, but my heart was fuller. Dressed in a flowing wine-colored gown, I walked up the stage as the crowd clapped. There were no spotlights big enough to reflect the glow on my skin or the peace in my soul. This was not just an event. This was my healing turned into a home for others. The screen behind me read, "The Anita Foundation, for every woman who refused to stay broken." I held the mic, paused for a breath, and looked at the crowd. Faces of women I've never met. Faces of those who once sent me messages saying, "Your story saved me." And now they were here. Not just watching, but standing with me. I took a deep breath and said, "I didn't build this foundation with money. I built it with pain. With long nights on the cold floor. With prayers that had no words. With the voice I once buried inside me." They clapped. But I wasn't done. I was once told that a woman's strength is in her silence. But now I know, our strength is in our scars. We are not strong because we didn't break. We're strong because we broke and still chose to rise. The applause grew louder. But my eyes drifted to the last row. And there, standing quietly in a black jacket, head bowed, was James. I hadn't seen him in months. But I recognized that posture. The way his shoulders slumped like someone carrying years of regret. He didn't come to be seen. He came to witness what he tried to destroy, now rise before him in glory. He stayed at the back. Said nothing. Took no pictures. But I saw his eyes glisten when Nora walked up to join me on stage and handed me the symbolic key to the women's shelter we had just built. The crowd went silent as she said, "This is for all the women who need a safe place. My mummy gave me a safe life. Now she's giving others a safe home." I broke down. Not in pain. In power. After the event, as guests took pictures and music filled the air, I felt a presence behind me. I turned. It was James. He looked older. Smaller. But softer. He didn't reach out to hug me. He didn't force a smile. He just said, "I had to see it with my own eyes." I nodded. Said nothing. He continued, "I know I'm not part of your life anymore. I've accepted that. But watching you tonight, I finally understood what love was supposed to look like. And I'm sorry I didn't learn it before I lost you." I looked at him long and hard. Then said, "James, the most expensive school in the world is experience. And you paid in full." He chuckled weakly, wiping his eyes. "You're right." He looked at Nora from afar and said, "She's growing. She has your strength." "She has my scars too," I replied. There was a pause. Then he said, "If she ever wants to know who I was, please tell her the truth. But also tell her I changed." I nodded again. "I'll tell her both." He whispered a quiet thank you and walked away, blending back into the crowd like dust returning to the ground. A week later, I sat at the new shelter's opening, watching 3 women arrive with only plastic bags in their hands. They looked scared. Lost. Just like I once did. I stood, welcomed them personally, gave them warm food, clean clothes, and beds to rest their heads. One of them asked me, "Are you the founder?" I smiled. "No. I'm just someone who knows how it feels to be forgotten." That night, as I walked through the rooms, checking on the women, I paused by an empty bed and whispered, "God, if this is all I ever become, it's enough." Because success wasn't the cameras. Or the contracts. Or the claps. Success was peace. Was watching my daughter dance in her room without fear. Was knowing that women I'll never meet will sleep tonight without bruises on their backs. Was the sound of my own laughter, unapologetic and full. I walked out to the balcony, looked up at the sky, and for the first time in years, I felt something deep in my chest. Freedom. Not the kind that comes from walking out of a house, but the kind that comes when the house you once ran from can no longer enter your mind. I closed my eyes and whispered, "I am healed." And even the sky seemed to nod in agreement. The final phase of this story did not come with a bang. No fireworks. No applause. Just silence. Sweet, peaceful silence. The kind I begged for in the middle of the night when James's voice boomed through the house. The kind that used to feel like a stranger but now wrapped itself around me like an old friend. It was a Sunday morning. The sun had barely risen, and Nora was still asleep. I stood in the kitchen, flipping pancakes, humming to the sound of birds outside. I was barefoot, wearing my favorite wrapper and a loose t-shirt. No makeup. No cameras. Just me, alive and full. My phone buzzed. A message from Grace. "Anita, your name just made the list of top 100 most influential women in Africa." I sat down slowly, staring at the screen. I didn't scream. I didn't jump. I just smiled. Because the world finally saw the woman James tried to bury alive. Not only had I survived, I had become someone worth honoring. That afternoon, Nora and I drove to our usual quiet park. She ran ahead with her friends, barefoot, laughing, chasing bubbles. I sat on a bench under a tree, watching her. The same child who once used to flinch at loud voices now laughed so hard it made people turn. A woman sat beside me. Soft-spoken. Middle-aged. She looked at me for a long time, then said, "I know your story." It gave me the courage to leave. I used to think I was weak. But you reminded me that we're not weak, we're just waiting for the right moment. I smiled and held her hand. "You are your own rescue," I said. "No one is coming to save you. But when you rise, even the devil will respect your silence." Later that evening, as we drove home, Nora asked me something unexpected. "Mummy, do you think Daddy is happy now?" I was quiet for a few seconds. Then said, "I don't know, baby. But I hope he's trying." She nodded slowly, then looked out the window. "He hurt you, right?" I took a deep breath. "Yes, he did." "But you forgave him?" "Yes." "Why?" I smiled. "Because forgiveness is not about the person who hurt you. It's about choosing not to carry their poison anymore." She didn't say anything, but I saw her shoulders relax. Like something inside her finally made sense. The next day, a letter arrived at my office. Handwritten. It was from James. It read, "Anita, I've accepted that I lost the best part of my life. But what gives me peace is knowing you turned your pain into purpose. You won, Anita. Not just against me, but against everything I represented. I hope one day, I can forgive myself the way you forgave me. Thank you for saving Nora. Thank you for not letting my darkness become her shadow. I'll never stop praying for you both. James." I folded the letter and placed it in the back of my drawer. Not to forget it, but to remember how far I had come. The Anita Foundation now has 3 shelters, hundreds of volunteers, and thousands of women being empowered every month. We offer training, counseling, relocation, and most importantly, a safe place to breathe again. Women who once whispered now speak boldly. Children who once hid now run freely. We are building an army of healed hearts. And I stand at the center, not as their savior, but as their sister. Conclusion. This is not just a story about a woman who was abused. It is not just about a man who fell from grace. This is a story about transformation. About what happens when a woman chooses not to die in silence. About what happens when pain is no longer a prison, but a platform. James beat me to entertain his friends. But in the end, I made him homeless, not just from a mansion, but from the seat of control he had in my life. And I didn't have to shout. I didn't have to fight. I just stood up, walked away, and rebuilt myself so strongly that the same world that once ignored my pain now listens when I speak. So to every woman out there watching this, hear me clearly. You are not weak. You are not broken. You are not crazy. You are becoming. And when you finally rise, don't just rise for revenge. Rise to reign. Because your scars were never meant to shame you. They were meant to crown you. And mine? They shine like gold. Billionaire husband kicks pregnant wife in front of his friends. Her revenge shocked everyone. The music was loud, the laughter was wild, and the smell of expensive cigars filled the billionaire's penthouse. But in the middle of all the noise, the unthinkable happened. Daniel, a man everyone respected, kicked his pregnant wife, Rose, right in front of his wealthy friends. She crashed against the marble floor, her hands instinctively wrapping around her stomach, as gasps echoed through the room. Some of the men laughed nervously, others shook their heads, but not one person moved to help her. Rose's eyes filled with tears, not just from the pain, but from the humiliation. She wasn't just hurt, she was shattered. The man she had sacrificed everything for had chosen to disgrace her in front of strangers. But what Rose didn't know at that moment was this. The same pain that broke her would later give her the fire to rise in a way nobody saw coming. "Get out of my sight, Rose." Daniel barked, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. He adjusted his gold wristwatch and smirked at his friends as if kicking his wife was a joke. "She's nothing but dead weight. Always whining. Always complaining. I can't stand her anymore." His friends chuckled uneasily, sipping their wine, afraid to challenge him. Rose slowly pushed herself up, her body trembling, her lips bleeding. The baby inside her seemed to kick harder, as if reminding her she wasn't alone. She looked at Daniel, searching for even a flicker of the man she married, the man who once whispered promises of forever. But his eyes were cold, sharp, filled with arrogance. Her voice cracked as she asked, "Daniel, why are you doing this to me?" Instead of answering, he turned to his friends and said, "Look at her. I told you she doesn't deserve this life. She's only here because of pity." His words stung deeper than the kick itself. The party continued, but Rose's heart froze in that moment. Every beat of her chest felt like betrayal. Every laugh from Daniel's friends echoed like thunder inside her. She had walked into the room a wife, but in front of everyone, she had been reduced to nothing. As she limped out, clutching her stomach, whispers followed her. Poor woman. She should leave him. But she won't. Not with his money. Rose heard it all. And though tears rolled down her cheeks, something inside her shifted. A small voice whispered in her soul, "This is not your end. This is your beginning." That night, she lay in the guest room, wide awake, staring at the ceiling. Memories of their love flooded her mind. The way Daniel used to bring her flowers when she was just a girl from a poor family, the way he promised to protect her, the way he swore she'd never cry because of him. And now, the same man had turned her into an object of shame. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from her best friend, Mary. "Rose, I warned you. A man who changes after wealth is a man who never loved you. Be strong. You don't deserve this." Rose's hand trembled as she read it. She wanted to believe Mary was wrong. She wanted to believe Daniel was just drunk, just stressed, just angry. But deep down, she knew the truth. This wasn't the first insult. This wasn't the first slap. But tonight was different. Tonight, he showed the world what she meant to him, nothing. Her tears dried on her face as a new kind of silence filled her heart. It wasn't weakness anymore. It was strength being born. Quiet, dangerous strength. And in that moment, Rose made a silent vow. One day, he will regret everything. One day, the world will not laugh at me. One day, I will rise so high that even Daniel's money cannot reach me. She didn't know how. She didn't know when. But she knew it would happen. The night closed in around her. The city lights glowed through the window, whispering secrets of power, survival, and revenge. And though Rose felt broken now, destiny was only just opening the first page of her story. Because what Daniel didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the woman he kicked tonight would become the very storm that would one day destroy him. The next morning, Rose woke up with swollen eyes and aching bones. Her body felt heavy, but her heart felt heavier. The mansion that once felt like a palace now felt like a prison. Every corner, every golden chandelier, every expensive chair whispered betrayal. She could still hear the echoes of Daniel's voice from the night before. "She's only here because of pity." Those words refused to leave her mind. They repeated like a curse. Rose dragged herself to the mirror. Her lip was cracked, her face bruised. But the worst wound was invisible, the humiliation. The reflection staring back at her didn't look like a billionaire's wife. It looked like a stranger, a broken woman begging to remember who she used to be before Daniel's money and lies. Downstairs, the sound of laughter reached her ears. Daniel was already awake, entertaining his friends with jokes over breakfast, as if nothing had happened. As if the kick, the insults, the disgrace were all just part of his fun. Rose slowly walked down the stairs, one hand on the railing, the other on her stomach. She entered the dining hall, and silence immediately filled the room. The men stared at her. Some looked guilty, others curious. Daniel didn't flinch. He simply poured himself another glass of orange juice and said, "What are you doing here, Rose? Shouldn't you be resting? Or are you here to embarrass me again?" Her lips trembled, but she forced herself to speak. "Daniel, I'm your wife. I'm carrying your child. Do you hate me so much that you can treat me like trash in front of everyone?" Daniel leaned back in his chair, a wicked smile tugging at his lips. "Wife? Don't make me laugh. You think a ring and a baby make you important? Without me, you are nothing. You were a poor girl from the slums, Rose. If I didn't pick you, you would still be selling vegetables on the roadside. Don't forget who gave you this life." His words stabbed her deeper than knives. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. Not this time. She tightened her grip on the railing, steadying herself. Something in her spirit refused to break. The men around the table shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a middle-aged businessman with kind eyes, cleared his throat and said softly, "Daniel, maybe you should calm down. She's pregnant. Don't let anger destroy your family." Daniel's gaze turned sharp, his pride boiling. "Stay out of this, Patrick. My marriage is none of your business." He slammed his hand on the table, making the plates rattle. Rose turned and left the room quietly, her dignity bleeding but her silence louder than any words. Later that afternoon, as Daniel drove off in his black SUV with two of his friends, Rose sat alone in the garden. The flowers around her were bright and full of life, but she felt empty inside. She touched her stomach, whispering to her unborn baby, "I will protect you. Even if your father hates me, I will never let you feel unwanted. I will fight for us." Her phone buzzed again. It was Mary, her best friend. "Rose, I'm coming over. I can't sit and watch you suffer like this." Within an hour, Mary arrived. She was a bold woman with fire in her eyes, the kind of friend who would fight the world for Rose. As soon as she saw the bruises, her face darkened. "Rose, this is not marriage. This is hell. Why are you still here? He will destroy you if you don't leave." Rose shook her head. "Mary, it's not that simple. Where would I go? How would I raise this baby alone? The world will laugh at me. They'll say I only loved him for his money." Mary held her hands firmly. "Let them laugh. At least you'll be free. At least you'll be alive. Rose, don't you see? You're holding on to a man who already let go of you. Daniel doesn't love you anymore. He loves his pride, his money, his power. But you still have yourself. Don't let him kill that." Rose's chest tightened as tears streamed down her face. "I still love him, Mary. I keep hoping he'll change." Mary sighed, her voice gentle but firm. "And while you keep hoping, he keeps breaking you. You don't need his change, you need your own. One day, Rose, he will regret everything. But that day will only come if you find your strength first." Those words settled deep in Rose's heart. They burned, but they also lit a spark. That evening, Daniel returned, drunk and laughing with his friends again. Rose didn't argue. She didn't cry. She served dinner silently, her eyes calm, her heart steady. For the first time, Daniel noticed her silence. He squinted at her, trying to read her. "What's with the quiet, Rose? You planning something?" She didn't answer. She simply looked at him with eyes that no longer begged, no longer pleaded. Eyes that promised something he couldn't yet understand. And in that silence, something shifted. Daniel laughed it off, but a strange uneasiness crept into him. For the first time, he felt that maybe, just maybe, Rose wasn't as broken as he thought. That night, while he slept, Rose stayed awake. She sat by the window, staring at the city lights, her mind racing. Mary's words echoed inside her, "One day he will regret everything." And with a steady hand on her stomach, Rose whispered, "That day is coming." The silence of the mansion was heavy, but inside Rose's heart, a new sound was rising, a heartbeat of strength, of revenge, of a woman who had finally realized that her pain would one day become her power. The week after the party felt like walking through fire for Rose. Daniel barely spoke to her except to insult her. At night, he stayed out late, and when he returned, he smelled of perfume that wasn't hers. She didn't need to ask, she already knew. One Saturday afternoon, Daniel hosted another lavish gathering in their mansion. The swimming pool glittered under the sun, music blasted, and women in expensive dresses filled the compound. Rose stayed inside, her swollen feet resting on the floor, her heart heavy but calm. She didn't want to show her face. She didn't want to face the whispers again. But Daniel had other plans. He barged into her room without knocking. He was dressed in a white linen shirt, gold chains on his neck, sunglasses resting on his head. He looked at her with disdain. "Why are you hiding in here like a ghost? Come downstairs. People are asking for you." Rose swallowed hard. "Daniel, I can't. My body is tired. I need to rest." Daniel's jaw tightened. He stepped closer and hissed, "Don't you dare embarrass me again. If you don't come out, I will drag you in front of everyone myself." Her heart pounded, but she obeyed. Slowly, she stood and followed him outside. The moment she stepped into the garden, silence fell. The crowd turned, eyes scanning her bruised face and fragile body. Daniel wrapped his arm around her waist, pretending to be the loving husband. "Everyone, meet my beautiful wife Rose," he announced with a smug smile. "She insists on looking simple, but she's the queen of this house." Rose forced a smile, but her chest burned. His words sounded sweet, but they dripped with poison. The crowd clapped lightly, but the whispers began again. "She looks weak. Poor woman. Why does he treat her like that?" One woman, bold and reckless, stepped forward. Her name was Cynthia, one of Daniel's business associate's girlfriends. She smirked and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Daniel, with all your money, why stick with this one? You deserve someone who shines like you." The crowd chuckled, waiting for Daniel's reaction. Rose's heart stopped. She prayed, just this once, that he would defend her, stand by her, prove that the man she married was still somewhere inside him. But Daniel laughed. A loud, mocking laugh. He turned to Cynthia and said, "You know, sometimes I ask myself the same thing." The crowd roared with laughter. Rose felt the world spin. Her legs trembled. She clutched her stomach as tears blurred her vision. In that moment, the man she once loved didn't just break her, he buried her alive in shame. Without another word, she turned and walked back inside. The laughter followed her like shadows. In the bedroom, she collapsed on the floor, her body shaking violently. She wanted to scream, but the pain was too heavy. She wanted to hate Daniel, but her heart still clung to the love she once had for him. That was the cruelest part, loving a man who had already destroyed her. Hours passed. The party ended. Daniel stormed into the room, drunk and arrogant. "Why did you walk out? Do you know how foolish you made me look?" Rose lifted her face, her tears shining in the dim light. "Foolish? Daniel, you laughed when they mocked me. You humiliated me in front of strangers. I gave you everything, and you treat me like nothing." Daniel's face twisted in anger. He grabbed her wrist tightly. "Everything? Don't deceive yourself. I made you. Without me, you are nobody. If you can't handle this life, leave. But don't forget, you can't survive without me." He shoved her hand away and stumbled into bed, falling asleep instantly, leaving Rose on the floor, broken and shaking. That night, something inside her finally snapped. She cried until her chest hurt, but by the time dawn arrived, her tears were gone. Her pain had turned into something sharper. Something unbreakable. She remembered Mary's words, "One day, he will regret everything. But that day will only come if you find your strength first." Rose stood in front of the mirror again. Her face was tired, her eyes red, but beneath the pain was a new fire. A fire that whispered, "This is not the end. This is the beginning." She pressed her hand against her stomach, whispering to her unborn child, "Your father thinks I'm weak, but he has no idea. He thinks I will break, but I will rise. And when I do, he will watch me shine without him." The mansion was silent, but Rose's heart was no longer quiet. A storm was building. A storm no wealth, no power, no arrogance could stop. And for the first time since her world began to collapse, Rose smiled. Not because she was healed, but because she finally knew Daniel's betrayal had not ended her. It had only awakened her. The morning after the humiliating party, Rose woke up to the sound of Daniel's phone ringing. He was still asleep, his arm flung carelessly across the bed. She glanced at the screen. It was a woman's name she didn't recognize. Her heart tightened, but she didn't answer. She simply placed the phone back on the table, her mind swirling with thoughts. Daniel had been careless lately. He flaunted his affairs like trophies, no longer hiding his betrayals. And yet, the world saw him as a successful, charming billionaire. Nobody knew the monster that lived behind the mansion's golden gates. Rose sat at the edge of the bed, her hand resting on her swollen stomach. She whispered softly, "I will not let you grow up in shame. I will not let your father's arrogance be the only story you know." Later that day, Daniel left for a business meeting. The mansion was quiet. Rose walked into his study, a place she rarely entered. Papers were scattered on the desk, business contracts, bank statements, shares in different companies. She stared at them, overwhelmed. For years, Daniel had locked her out of everything, telling her she was too simple to understand business. But now, something inside her refused to stay ignorant. She picked up a file and began reading. At first, the words felt like a foreign language. But slowly, as she flipped through page after page, she began to see patterns, names, accounts, figures. Something told her this was the beginning of knowledge she would one day need. Just then, the door opened. Mary walked in quietly. "Rose? What are you doing in here?" Rose quickly closed the file, guilt flashing across her face. I was just looking." Mary walked closer, her eyes sharp. "No. You weren't just looking. You were searching. Tell me, Rose. Are you finally ready to stop being his shadow?" Rose's chest rose and fell heavily. She looked at her friend, her eyes trembling but fierce. "Mary, I don't know how. But I can't keep living like this. I need to stand on my own. I need to be more than just Daniel's wife." Mary smiled faintly, though her eyes were full of seriousness. "Then you need to start preparing. Stop crying. Stop waiting for his pity. Learn. Watch. Build yourself, even in silence. Because one day, Rose, that knowledge will be your weapon." Those words planted deeper roots in Rose's heart. She nodded slowly. For the first time, she wasn't just thinking about leaving, she was thinking about rising. That evening, Daniel returned. He threw his jacket on the chair and poured himself a drink. "Rose," he called out, his tone mocking, "I'm traveling to Cape Town for a week. Don't bother calling me. I need space from your tears and complaints." She stood in the doorway, her hands clasped together. "Daniel, do you hate me so much? What did I ever do to deserve this?" He laughed bitterly, sipping his drink. "You existed. That's what you did. You think I owe you loyalty? Wake up, Rose. Love doesn't buy private jets. Affection doesn't close million-dollar deals. You were a mistake, and one day, you'll thank me for reminding you of that." Her heart clenched, but she didn't cry. Not this time. She simply whispered, "One day, Daniel, you'll regret every word." He smirked, unconcerned. "We'll see." Then he walked away, humming as if her pain was nothing more than background noise. That night, Rose sat by the window again. The city lights flickered in the distance, each one reminding her that the world outside was bigger than this mansion, bigger than Daniel's shadow. She opened her small diary and began to write. "I will not be broken. I will not be silent. I will learn. I will rise. And when the time comes, he will see me, not as his victim, but as the woman he could never destroy." As she closed the diary, she felt her baby kick. It was as if the child inside her was agreeing, urging her forward. A soft smile touched her lips for the first time in weeks. The next morning, Rose did something she hadn't done in months. She dressed up, not in the dull gowns Daniel preferred, but in a simple, elegant dress that hugged her gently. She tied her hair neatly and applied a touch of lip gloss. When she looked at the mirror, she didn't see the broken woman anymore. She saw a glimpse of the girl Daniel first fell in love with, the girl who had dreams of her own before wealth and power chained her down. When she walked into the kitchen, the staff stared at her in surprise. One of the maids whispered, "Madam looks different today, stronger." Rose smiled softly. She wasn't there yet, but she was on her way. That afternoon, she called Mary. "I need your help," she said firmly. "Teach me what I need to know. Teach me how to stand." Mary's voice lit up with pride. "Finally. Rose, this is the first step. And trust me, Daniel won't even see it coming." And just like that, the silence of defeat began to fade. Rose was still hurting, still bruised, still carrying scars, but now she carried something else too. Something far more powerful. Hope. And deep inside her chest, beneath the bruises and broken promises, a fire burned brighter than ever before. The same fire that would one day turn her pain into her greatest weapon. Daniel's trip to Cape Town was supposed to last a week, but he stayed away for almost a month. He called once or twice, only to bark instructions at the staff or insult Rose for asking about him. Most of the time, he ignored her completely. Every day, Rose tried to hold herself together. She read the files in Daniel's study when no one was around. She wrote in her diary at night, recording every bruise, every insult, every moment of betrayal. The pain still weighed heavy on her, but with Mary's constant encouragement, she began to see it differently. Mary visited often, bringing books about business, finance, and self-growth. Rose devoured them, slowly piecing together knowledge Daniel never wanted her to have. Sometimes she read while holding her belly, whispering to her baby, "We will not be weak. We will not be victims. We will rise together." But while Rose was trying to rebuild herself, Daniel was busy destroying what little was left of their marriage. One Friday evening, Rose received an anonymous message on her phone. The words hit her like lightning. "Check the news. Your husband isn't in Cape Town. He's in Dubai, with another woman." Her hands shook as she opened the link attached. There he was, Daniel, grinning in front of flashing cameras at a luxury hotel, his arm wrapped around a stunning woman in a red dress. They looked like royalty, like a power couple. The headline read, "Billionaire Daniel Scott seen with mystery woman at Dubai Gala." Rose's chest tightened, her vision blurring. The world knew now. Her humiliation was no longer private, it was public. She dropped the phone, collapsing into a chair. 4 hours, she couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. How much more could her heart endure? By the time Daniel returned home days later, Rose was no longer the same. She had no tears left to give him. Only silence. He swaggered into the mansion, sunglasses on, suitcase in hand. "Where's my welcome, Rose? No hug? No kiss? Or did you enjoy your pity party while I was gone?" She stood in the hallway, her arms crossed. Her voice was steady, cold. "How was Dubai?" For a split second, Daniel froze. His eyes narrowed. "Who told you that?" Rose didn't flinch. "It doesn't matter who told me. I saw the pictures. The world saw the pictures." Daniel smirked, adjusting his watch. "And so what? You think you're the only woman who wants me? You should be grateful I even keep you here. Don't act like you didn't know who I was when you married me. Power attracts options, Rose. Learn to live with it." Her fists clenched at her side. "No, Daniel. Power doesn't change a man's heart. It only reveals it." For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. He stared at her, his smirk fading. Something in her eyes unsettled him. They weren't the eyes of a begging wife anymore. They were the eyes of a woman who had seen the truth. That night, Rose made her first bold move. She called Mary and whispered, "I'm ready." Mary arrived the next morning with a laptop. "If you want to break free, you need money of your own," she said. "Daniel has kept you in the dark, but you can start small. Use your knowledge, use your mind, use your pain. Build something he can't take away." Rose hesitated, fear gnawing at her. "But what if he finds out? He'll destroy me." Mary took her hand, squeezing it firmly. "Rose, he's already destroying you. Isn't it better to fight back than to keep bleeding?" Those words echoed in her chest. That night, after Daniel left for yet another late-night meeting, Rose sat with Mary in the study. They researched businesses she could start quietly, something small, something manageable. Rose remembered her childhood, helping her mother sell vegetables at the roadside market. She had always been good with people, good at organizing. And then it clicked. Mary, what if I start a food business? Home catering. Healthy meals for working-class families. I know the recipes. I know the taste people crave. And with your help, I can learn the business side. Mary's face lit up. Yes. Rose, that's perfect. Start where you're strong. Build from there. You don't need Daniel's billions. You just need your courage. Rose smiled faintly. For the first time in months, she felt alive. Over the next few weeks, she secretly put plans into motion. With the help of one loyal maid, she tested recipes in the kitchen, packaging them neatly. Mary helped her set up an online page under a different name. Orders began to trickle in slowly, and though the money was small, it was hers. It was freedom, piece by piece. One evening, as Rose served dinner, Daniel barely looked at her. He scrolled on his phone, chuckling at messages from another woman. He thought she was still weak, still broken, still begging. But what Daniel didn't know was that the woman standing in front of him had already taken her first step out of his shadow. And with every secret order, every satisfied customer, every coin she earned, Rose's chains loosened. She was no longer just Daniel's wife. She was becoming Rose, the woman who would one day rise so high that Daniel would be forced to look up. And when that day came, his arrogance, his pride, and his cruelty would no longer protect him. The mansion glittered with lights that night. Daniel had thrown yet another lavish party, this time to celebrate a new business deal. Rose stood in the corner of the living room, watching him laugh loudly, his arm casually wrapped around a woman who wasn't her. Cameras flashed, music thundered, and Daniel shone like a king in his palace. But Rose wasn't the same broken woman she had been weeks ago. Beneath her calm expression, fire simmered. She had learned to smile without showing her wounds, to nod without showing her heartache. While Daniel paraded his arrogance for the world to see, Rose was building hers quietly in the shadows. Her food business, under a different name, was slowly growing. Orders came daily, and the maid who helped her now had 2 assistants. Mary managed the accounts, teaching Rose how to balance profits and reinvest wisely. Every small success gave Rose strength. Every happy customer gave her hope. Daniel had no idea. He thought she was still helpless, still chained to his wealth. But what he didn't know was that every secret coin Rose earned was a brick in the wall of her freedom. Rose. Daniel's voice cut through her thoughts. He waved at her from across the room. Come here. She walked over, her steps graceful, her smile controlled. Daniel pulled her closer, then turned to his friends. This is my wife. Doesn't she look beautiful tonight? She finally dressed like she belongs here. His friends chuckled, raising their glasses. Rose forced a smile, though her stomach turned at his words. Daniel wasn't praising her, he was mocking her, reminding everyone that he owned her image, her life. One of the men leaned closer, whispering, Daniel, you're lucky. Many women would kill to be in her position. She's loyal, even after everything. Daniel smirked, sipping his drink. Loyal? Please. She knows without me she's nothing. She wouldn't survive a day outside this mansion. The laughter stung, but Rose didn't flinch. She looked at Daniel, her eyes steady, her smile soft but sharp. Inside, her vow grew stronger. One day, Daniel, you will eat those words. Later that night, when the party ended and the mansion was silent, Daniel stumbled into the bedroom drunk. He threw his shoes off carelessly and collapsed on the bed. Rose sat by the window, staring at the city lights. Without looking at her, Daniel muttered, You're lucky, Rose. Do you know how many women want me? I keep you here out of pity. Be grateful. Rose turned her head slowly. For once, her voice didn't tremble. Pity? Daniel, I don't need your pity. And one day, you will see that I am not the weak woman you think I am. He laughed sleepily. We'll see about that. But his laugh didn't shake her anymore. His words no longer had the power to crush her spirit. The next day, Rose's business had its biggest order yet. An office needed catering for an event. Mary and the staff worked tirelessly, and by evening, the client was so impressed that they promised more contracts. For the first time in months, Rose felt joy that wasn't tied to Daniel. It was hers, earned with her own strength. As she counted the money that night, she whispered, This is only the beginning. But just as her fire grew, Danger lurked around the corner. One evening, Daniel came home earlier than usual. He walked into the kitchen, expecting to find Rose sitting idly as always. Instead, he found her supervising the maids, checking neatly packed food boxes. His eyes narrowed. "What is this?" he demanded. Rose froze. The air grew heavy. Mary stepped forward quickly, her voice calm. "Oh, these? They're just extra meals for the staff's families." Rose wanted to make sure nothing goes to waste. Daniel studied the boxes suspiciously. Rose forced a smile. "Yes, Daniel. Just making sure the food doesn't spoil." He grunted, unconvinced, but too tired to argue. He turned and left, muttering, "You better not waste my money on nonsense." The moment he left, Rose's knees buckled. Mary grabbed her arm. "That was close. Rose, you need to be careful. If he finds out, he'll try to destroy this." Rose straightened, fire burning in her chest. "Let him try. He can break my bones, but he can't kill my spirit. This," she gestured at the food boxes, "this is my weapon. One day, it will be my escape." And from that night, she worked harder. More orders came in. More money flowed quietly into an account Daniel didn't know existed. Her secret empire was growing in the shadows of his arrogance. Daniel, meanwhile, grew bolder. He brought women into the mansion openly, laughing as if daring Rose to complain. He thought her silence was weakness. But what he didn't know was that her silence was strategy. Because while he was busy feeding his pride, Rose was feeding her future. And soon, the man who thought she was nothing would discover the storm he had created. The night was heavy with thunder, rain pounding against the glass walls of the mansion. Rose sat on the bed, holding her diary close, her pen scratching out painful truths she could never say aloud. Each word was a scar on paper. "He broke me in front of strangers. He parades other women while I carry his child. One day, this pain will become my weapon." The door slammed open. Daniel staggered in, reeking of alcohol and perfume. His shirt was half-buttoned, lipstick stains across his collar. His eyes were cold, his jaw tight. "Rose," he barked. "Why do you always look at me like that? Like I'm the devil. I gave you everything. Yet you sit here judging me with those eyes." She closed her diary quietly and whispered, "Daniel, I'm not judging you. I'm just tired." "Tired?" He scoffed, stepping closer. "You're tired? You're useless, Rose. You don't even make me proud anymore. You think carrying my child makes you special? You're weak." Before she could respond, his hand struck her across the face. She fell to the floor, the sting burning her skin, her body trembling. She cradled her stomach, terrified for her baby. "Daniel, please," she begged, her voice breaking. But he only sneered. "You better learn your place, Rose. Or one day, I'll throw you out like trash." He stumbled onto the bed, falling asleep within minutes, as if nothing had happened. Rose lay on the floor, tears mixing with the rain sounds outside. Her face burned, her heart ached, but something deeper shifted. She whispered to herself, "This is the last time he will ever break me." The next morning, Mary rushed over after hearing what happened. When she saw the bruises, her eyes filled with rage. "Enough is enough, Rose. If you stay silent, he'll kill you. You need people. Allies. If you can't fight him alone, then build your army." Rose's voice was weak, but her eyes were steady. "Who will stand with me, Mary? Everyone fears him. Everyone worships his money." Mary leaned closer. "Not everyone. There are people Daniel has stepped on. People who smile at his face but bleed behind his back. You just need to find them." Those words stuck with Rose. That week, she started paying closer attention. She listened to the whispers of the staff, the complaints of the drivers, the frustration of the workers Daniel treated like disposable tools. One day, she overheard one of Daniel's managers arguing on the phone in the garden. The man, Mr. Ade, was furious. "Daniel doesn't respect anyone. He takes credit for our work, he cuts salaries without warning, and he thinks we're his slaves. But one day, his arrogance will bury him." Rose approached him cautiously. "Mr. Ade?" He looked startled, embarrassed she had heard. "Madam, forgive me. I didn't mean." She shook her head. Don't apologize. You're right. He's destroying people, not just me. But you're not alone. I know how it feels. Mr. Ade looked at her, surprised. Then he lowered his voice. Madam, if you ever need help, call me. I may not have money like him, but I know his business secrets. I know how he cheats people. If the day comes when you want to stand against him, I will be there. For the first time, Rose realized she wasn't entirely alone. There were cracks in Daniel's empire. Cracks she could one day use. Meanwhile, her food business was thriving. The orders grew larger, the profits doubled. She used part of the money to quietly support a few of the staff in the mansion, winning their loyalty. The maids whispered among themselves, Madame Rose is different. She cares. She helps us. Daniel noticed none of it. He was too busy flaunting his wealth, drowning in pride. One evening, as Rose tucked herself into bed, Mary called. Rose, I've been thinking. You're not just surviving anymore, you're building. But soon, you'll need to choose. Will you keep hiding, or will you prepare to strike? Rose's hand rested on her stomach. Her baby kicked, as if reminding her of the future she was fighting for. Her voice was firm when she replied, I'm preparing. I've been weak too long. But when I strike, it won't just be for me, it'll be for everyone he's crushed. And Daniel will never see it coming. She closed her eyes, her mind racing with plans. She saw flashes of Daniel's arrogance, his laughter, his cruelty, and she saw them crumbling like glass under the weight of his own pride. Because Daniel had mistaken her silence for surrender. But what he didn't know was that her silence was the sound of a storm gathering. And when that storm finally broke, it would wash away everything he thought he controlled. The city glittered under neon lights as Daniel walked into yet another business dinner, surrounded by men who bowed at his presence. But behind their polite smiles, envy and resentment lingered. Daniel didn't notice, or maybe he didn't care. He was too consumed by his own arrogance to see the storm brewing against him. Back in the mansion, Rose sat at her desk, staring at her diary. But tonight, she wasn't writing pain. She was writing plans. Names of Daniel's enemies. Accounts she had discovered from documents he left carelessly on his desk. Connections she could use later. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was quietly learning how to play his game. Her food business had now expanded. What started with small orders was turning into contracts with offices and small events. Mary helped her secure a hidden account where the profits were stored safely. The business had a name now, Rose's Delight. Only a few trusted people knew she was behind it. Each coin she earned made her stronger. Each satisfied client whispered that she had something Daniel could never take away, her own identity. One afternoon, as she supervised the staff in the kitchen, one of the drivers approached her cautiously. Madam Rose. I don't mean to intrude, but, thank you. Last week, when you gave money for my son's hospital bill, you saved his life. I will never forget. Rose smiled softly. You don't owe me anything. Just, remember, kindness is not weakness. The driver lowered his voice. Madam, if you ever need help, call me. Many of us, we are tired of how the master treats us. We respect you more than him. Her chest tightened. The staff, the people Daniel treated like shadows, they were beginning to see her differently. And with each act of kindness, she wasn't just building loyalty. She was building an army. Meanwhile, Daniel's pride began to betray him. His reckless spending, his arrogance in business meetings, his disregard for contracts, cracks began to show. One evening, Rose overheard him shouting in his study. Don't threaten me, he barked into the phone. I don't care about your lawyers. I own this city. Nobody dares to touch me. But the moment he hung up, he slammed his glass against the wall. His face, usually so smug, was pale with worry. Rose watched from the shadows, her heart strangely calm. Daniel wasn't as invincible as he pretended. That night, when he stormed into bed, she whispered quietly, Daniel, be careful. Pride can destroy even kings. He glared at her. Don't speak in riddles, Rose. Without me, you'd be nothing. Don't ever forget that. She smiled faintly. One day, you'll see I was never nothing. Daniel scoffed and turned away, but her words lingered in the air like a prophecy. Weeks later, Rose received unexpected news. Her catering business had been recommended for a high-profile corporate event. It was the biggest order yet, one that would put her name on the map if it succeeded. She was nervous, but Mary reminded her, "This is your chance, Rose. This is how you start stepping out of his shadow." On the day of the event, Rose stayed hidden behind the name she had created. She supervised quietly, ensuring everything went smoothly. The clients were impressed, praising Rose's delight as if it was a miracle discovery. By the end of the night, she had secured contracts for months to come. As she counted the money later, her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness but of triumph. "This," she whispered to her baby, "is our beginning." But while Rose was rising in silence, Daniel was unknowingly digging his own grave. His enemies in the business world were growing bolder. Partners he had cheated were gathering evidence. Politicians he had bribed were beginning to turn against him. And Rose, with every diary entry, with every piece of information she collected, knew that the day would come when all of it would collapse. One night, she sat by her window, the city lights glowing in the distance. Mary's voice echoed in her mind, "Build your army." She thought of Mr. Ade, the driver, the staff, her clients. Piece by piece, she wasn't just surviving, she was building her future. And when that future came, Daniel would face something more dangerous than enemies in the boardroom. He would face the quiet, unbreakable strength of the woman he thought was powerless. The storm was no longer coming. The storm was already here. The news broke like wildfire. Billionaire Daniel Scott under investigation for fraud and tax evasion. Every channel carried the story. Social media exploded with videos of Daniel shouting at reporters as he was escorted out of his office by government officials. His once spotless reputation was now stained. Investors began to pull out. Partners refused his calls. And for the first time, Daniel looked like what he had always denied being, just a man, not a god. Rose watched the news from the living room, her baby kicking gently in her womb. She didn't smile, but her silence spoke louder than any laughter. She whispered softly, "Pride always falls." Daniel stormed into the mansion that evening, his shirt soaked in sweat, his eyes bloodshot with rage. "Rose," he bellowed. She walked out calmly, holding her diary in one hand. "Yes, Daniel." His chest heaved as he pointed at her. "Don't you dare look at me like that. Do you think this is funny? Do you think I'll lose everything? I'm Daniel Scott. Nobody can touch me." Rose tilted her head slightly, her voice soft but sharp. "You're not untouchable, Daniel. You never were. You've hurt too many people. You've built your empire on broken hearts and crushed souls. Now the cracks are showing." He froze, staring at her as if seeing her for the first time. Her voice wasn't weak anymore. It carried weight. It carried truth. He laughed bitterly, trying to shake off the chill her words left. "Don't get comfortable, Rose. I'll fix this. I'll always rise." But deep inside Daniel knew, this time, rising wouldn't be easy. The days that followed were chaos. The government froze his accounts. His luxury cars were seized. Paparazzi camped outside the mansion, waiting for every move. Former friends disappeared. Even the women he flaunted abandoned him overnight. And in the middle of it all was Rose. Quiet. Watching. Stronger than ever. Her catering business was booming now. The corporate event had given her visibility, and orders flowed daily. While Daniel's empire crumbled, Rose's was rising silently. She still kept it hidden from him, but her confidence grew with each passing day. One afternoon, Daniel sat in the study, his hands buried in his hair, his phone buzzing with unanswered calls. Rose walked in, her steps calm, her voice steady. "Daniel," she said, "you need to face the truth. You can't bully or bribe your way out this time." He looked up at her, his eyes red with anger and desperation. "And what do you know about truth, Rose? You're nothing but a burden. If I hadn't picked you from the gutter, you'd still be selling tomatoes on the roadside." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "And yet, even from the roadside, I had more dignity than you do now." The words pierced him. For once, he had no answer. That night, Rose met Mary at a small cafe downtown. She wore a plain dress and no jewelry, blending in with the crowd. They sat in the corner, speaking in hushed voices. "Rose," Mary said, "this is your moment. Daniel is weak. His enemies are circling. If you step forward now, you won't just free yourself, you'll stand on top of everything he thought he owned. Rose's eyes glistened, but they were not filled with tears. They were filled with fire. I don't want his money, Mary. I don't want his empire. What I want is for him to feel everything he made me feel, rejected, humiliated, powerless. Only then will he understand. Mary leaned forward. And you're ready to do it? Rose nodded. Yes. It's time. The following week, Daniel's worst nightmare unfolded. Several of his staff members, people he had underpaid, insulted, and abused, came forward with evidence against him. Documents leaked to the press. Stories of his arrogance spread like wildfire. And hidden among the shadows of those voices was Rose. She had been quietly feeding information through her allies, Mr. Ade, the driver, even the loyal maids. The very people Daniel thought beneath him had become the cracks that shattered his crown. One evening, Daniel sat alone in the living room, surrounded by silence. No friends. No women. No calls. Just silence. Rose walked in, carrying a tray of tea. She placed it gently on the table in front of him. "Drink," she said calmly. He looked up at her, his pride wounded, his voice hollow. "Rose, do you enjoy this? Watching me fall?" She looked at him for a long moment, then whispered, "No, Daniel. I don't enjoy it. But I endured it. And now, you are enduring it too." He lowered his head, his hands trembling. For the first time, the king looked like a beggar. And Rose, standing tall above him, realized the truth. She had already won. But her final blow, the one that would end his arrogance forever, was still to come. The once glittering mansion was silent. Dust gathered on furniture, weeds crept through the garden, and the staff had mostly left. Daniel sat in the living room, his head buried in his hands, his once flawless suit wrinkled and stained. The proud billionaire was now a man drowning in shame. His empire had collapsed. His accounts frozen, his businesses under investigation, his friends gone. The newspapers that once praised him now mocked him. From riches to ruin, the fall of Daniel Scott. Rose stood by the window, watching him quietly. She wasn't the same woman he used to kick and mock. Her dress was simple yet elegant, her posture confident. The glow on her face wasn't from wealth, it was from strength. She finally spoke. "Daniel, do you remember the night you kicked me in front of your friends? Do you remember how you laughed when they mocked me?" He lifted his head slowly, his eyes hollow. "Rose, please. Don't remind me. I've lost everything." Her voice was calm, but it cut sharper than knives. "No, Daniel. You haven't lost everything. You lost yourself long before the money disappeared. And you thought I was nothing without you. But look at me now." At that moment, Mary walked in with a stack of documents. She placed them on the table. Daniel's eyes widened. "What is this?" Mary smiled faintly. "Evidence. Testimonies. Leaks. The same cracks that brought you down. You thought you owned everyone, but they chose Rose." Daniel's chest heaved as he looked at Rose. You did this?" She met his gaze firmly. "No, Daniel. You did this to yourself. I just stopped covering your sins." Silence filled the room. For the first time in his life, Daniel had no power, no pride, no weapons left. Rose stepped closer, her hand resting gently on her stomach. "You told me I was nothing without you. But today, I stand tall without your name, without your money, without your pity. I built something of my own. And unlike you, I didn't destroy people to rise, I lifted them with me." Daniel's lips trembled. His pride wanted to speak, but his shame sealed his tongue. Tears welled in his eyes, but he quickly wiped them away, unwilling to let her see. Rose turned to leave, her voice calm but final. "This mansion, this empire, this shadow of yours, it no longer holds me. I choose freedom. I choose dignity. I choose myself." She walked out with Mary by her side, the echo of her steps heavy with finality. Outside, a black SUV waited. The driver, loyal to Rose now, opened the door. As she stepped in, the press swarmed, cameras flashing. For the first time the world saw her, not as Daniel's wife, not as his victim, but as Rose, the woman who survived humiliation and turned it into power. A reporter shouted, Madame Rose. Do you have any words for your husband in his downfall? She paused, her hand gently resting on her baby bump. Then with a calm, steady voice she said, "Tell him, when you kick someone to the ground, don't forget, they might rise higher than you ever dreamed." The crowd erupted. Her words trended across the nation within hours. That night, while Daniel sat alone in his empty mansion, Rose stood on a stage at her catering company's launch event. The hall was filled with clients, employees, and well-wishers. Mary stood proudly beside her. Rose took the microphone, her eyes glistening. "I was once told I was nothing. That without wealth, I had no value. But I stand here today to tell you all, your worth is not defined by anyone else. It is defined by how you rise after being broken. Never let rejection kill you. Never let humiliation silence you. Use your pain as fire. Because when you do, nobody can stop you." The hall roared with applause. At that moment, Rose wasn't just a survivor. She was a symbol. A woman who had faced betrayal, neglect, rejection, and turned it into strength, dignity, and empowerment. Daniel watched her speech from a small television in his dim living room. His hands trembled as regret suffocated him. He whispered softly, his voice breaking, "I destroyed the only person who truly loved me." But it was too late. Because Rose had already closed the chapter. And as the applause echoed across the city, her new life began, not as Daniel's shadow, but as Rose, the woman who rose above betrayal, claimed her power, and taught the world that revenge is best served with success. Rose walked away from pain into power. Daniel's arrogance ended in loneliness and regret, while Rose's strength built a legacy of dignity, resilience, and self-love. The story ends not with bitterness, but with triumph, showing that the greatest revenge isn't destroying your enemy. It's rising so high that they can never touch you again.